Hello everyone! Having finally covered the entire Pan-Asian DD line, I think it's time to return to some of our older ships. In this case, I will be featuring the Yamato. Now the matchmaking isn't exactly in my favor, considering the enemy has 5 DDs, which is pretty much nightmare status for any battleship, but especially the Yamato because of some of its unique characteristics. This is on the NA server though, hence why my name is renamed user, because Wargaming didn't like my previous name, so now I'm gonna have to think of a new name for my NA account. Still though, pushing the left flank. As you can see, we got 2 DDs going to the left flank, so I might as well support them. I actually quite like this gap. You can see there's this narrow gap where you can get these extremely good field of fire right all the way to the enemy base, and if you push up close enough to this island on your right, they can't shoot your vulnerable broadside from the right either, which means you are able to isolate your target to only the guy in front of you, which is of course optimal. A Mogami is pushing in surprisingly aggressively down the middle. I expect him to turn right, so I shoot accordingly, but it turns out he's actually slowing down and turning in, which is certainly an interesting decision and not something I expected. Doing it to juke one volley is okay, but he's actually slowing down completely, which I will admit completely juked my volley, but now he's extremely vulnerable to the follow-up shot. So I'm not certain what exactly his plan was here, but I'm popping spotter plane to see if he's reversing. He is not, he's entirely stationary, so I see if I can punish him instead. The Grosse Kurfürst is giving me a lot of broadside, which of course means he is now an extremely tempting target, especially since dispersion doesn't seem to favor me on the Mogami at all. The problem on this flank though, as we can see right now, is that there is probably all 3 DDs on this flank. We have spotted 2, but there's 1 capping as well, so that means there's 3 DDs on this flank, and we are 4 versus at least 6 at this point on this flank. More importantly though, if we look at the minimap, we can see that our team is quite unopposed and is able to push heavily on BC, so obviously our decision is to start to reverse. There's no point pushing in because the majority of their team is here, whereas half our team is on the other side of the map. When you end up in situations like this, pushing into a numerical advantage is almost always a bad idea. You can push when you have equal numbers, but it's quite challenging because if you push into equal numbers, the enemy team of course has an advantage because if you're the one holding a position, you can position yourself in such a way that you put islands on your vulnerable flanks and you create crossfires for the enemy team to have to push into. So, and this is of course what the enemy team has done, and this is of course why pushing into this is not a good idea. The defender almost always has an advantage in this game, and if we're outnumbered, pushing into that advantage is a terrible idea. So, of course, I am reversing, and I'm trying to delay them as much as possible. Note that whenever I spot a DD, I target him and I try to shoot him, because DDs are very strong, and as I said, they are a huge threat to the Yamato. Give. I have 56k damage top right. I always look at the number if I don't get vision, and I think I did about 8k damage to that Kiev, so a very good volley in that sense. Even though it didn't look like we got any massive pens, that's still a lot of damage. Now, important note here is this Kurfürst. This Kurfürst that's hiding behind that island is actually a huge issue for me right now. And that is because the Yamato is exceptionally vulnerable to being locked into an angle. Now, what do I mean by locked into an angle? If there's a battleship in front of you, and you're a battleship as well, turning broadside means you give the enemy battleship a very juicy shot. And some battleships are more vulnerable than others, and Yamato in particular is the single most vulnerable tier 10 battleship to this. Now, the further away you are from a battleship, the less of an impact this locking on has, or being locked into an angle has. But at these distances that I was just earlier, like 12-13 km away from the Kurfürst, being locked into an angle is a huge threat. Because, for example, if a Grosse Kurfürst gets locked into an angle with another battleship, he can turn away. If he turns away, sure, he'll get broadside, he'll maybe eat like 30-40k damage, but it's going to be penetration damage, which means he can heal 50% of it. So ultimately, he'll probably walk away after using his heal, maybe 20k health less, and he's able to disengage from this lock-on situation without any issues. A Conqueror can probably use his stealth to disengage, and even if he turns, the lowered Citadel means it's unlikely that he will get much of a punishment. Even the Montana can turn away from a situation like this fairly well. Yamato, on the other hand, doesn't have the concealment to get away and has an exceptionally raised citadel compared to all the other tier 10 battleships, which means that if someone locks you into position in front of you and forces you to stay in that position, you pretty much have to reverse away. And that leaves you very vulnerable because now your maneuvers are predictable, especially on a flank like this with this many DDs, and considering they have a North Carolina on our left flank and a Yamato and Lion still in their spawn, being caught in a stationary position would be very vulnerable. Especially since the Yamato has this hexagon-shaped citadel, which means that if you try to angle even slightly, you risk being citadeled through the side of the nose, not just straight through the nose, which only a Yamato can do. So you really don't want to end up in situations where you're forced into this angle lock. And that was what I was afraid of because of that quarter force, and that's why I didn't really want to go into that situation at all. My team keeps insisting on pushing that flank, which I think is a terrible idea. They need to stop doing it. I reposition myself so I can help my team at B instead, because there's no point pushing into two battleships, one wide, one central, and two flanking DDs, one torpedo boat, one gunboat. That's so easy for them to deal damage in that position. And my DDs right now, well, they push themselves into they basically managed to make themselves surrounded. They are shot at from pretty much every single angle, and the enemy does have a Yugomo to spot them as well, which means they can't really outspot the enemy either. So the enemy team, my team has managed to really screw themselves over. That's why I'm pushing up here between these islands, because I want to try to help my Fletcher survive this situation that he's put himself into. Still loading AP, of course, until that changes. The fact that you can get AP pens, using AP on DDs is still the best tool because it's pretty stupidly powerful. I gotta keep in mind that the North Carolina might get shots at me, and I gotta keep in mind that the Yamato can overmatch my nose as well. But that's okay, I'm still full HP. That's because I haven't had any real opportunities to push in and absorb hits for my team. There hasn't really been any opportunities. I've been trying to look for them, I've been searching for them, and it's not always that easy to find them. It's one thing absorbing damage because you're in an intelligent position. It's another thing just pushing in and eating damage for no real reason. And pushing into A with my team would have been the exact that. Pushing in and eating damage for no real reason. Fletcher is gunboating the Yugomo, which is okay, but with the NC that close, it's very risky, and I wish he would just smoke up and disengage, because if he dies, this flank is absolutely guaranteed lost. I cannot hold it alone. The Yamato is not a good solo ship, and being forced to hold the flank alone against the DD will never work. So he is finally smoking up, but he's still moving. He needs to stop and get undetected. They have no radar, they have no hydro. All he needs to do is get undetected in his smoke, and once he's undetected, he can sail away to safety. As long as he's alive, able to torp and spot for me, he's still hugely valuable, even if he gives up the cap. But instead, he keeps sailing around and he keeps shooting. And that, of course, means that he will almost certainly die. And that's a huge problem for me, because once he dies, that left flank is going to get blown right wide open. And he does die, and that means I'm probably going to lose vision of this NC very soon. I've already lost vision of the Yugomo. And that means the A flank is gone at this point, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's not that big of a deal though, because we hold the cap advantage. So as long as I can maintain this cap advantage, we are still in a fairly good position. I even told him in chat, Fletcher just sit in smoke earlier, and then later on I asked why didn't he just sit in the smoke and just get undetected. And the argument is that the Yugomo would torp it. Yes, but you don't have to sit in the smoke like all game. You sit in it just long enough for your concealment to disappear. You angle in and you sit just long enough for your firing debuff to disappear, and then you flee. Trying to fight a DD and a battleship in a DD is usually going to end up in tears, as it did there. Now, because of the Yugomo in A, I'm forced to reverse. And the NC that's undetected, and I can't do anything about him, I am forced to reverse and put the island between me and him. Of course, there's the threat of the Skorforst. I still don't know where he is, so I pop my spotter plane to give me some aerial vision of his location. And he's in fact pushing up this flank. See, there was the risk that he might push between the caps and straight up rush me. And if I'd pushed up in that case and he would have rushed down between the islands, I would have gotten caught from two flanks. And that's something the Yamato is so terribly bad at. It's one of the worst battleships at being caught in crossfires. It doesn't deal with it well at all. Now I want to push up to help my team, but the problem is I don't know where the NC is, and I don't know where the Yugamo is. I have a good idea that the Yugamo is hunting me, so I'm doing a bit of a bait here, which is I accelerate and then I stop. I accelerate and I stop because I notice the priority target number goes from 1 to 0. And this is kind of baiting the Yugamo into perhaps using his torpedoes, and this will give me information if he's actually hunting me. And it turns out my instincts are very good in this situation, and I managed to bait the Yugamo into launching both his volleys at me. However, there's a risk that this Yugamo is torpedo reload, because he fought the Fletcher and he didn't smoke up. I haven't seen the Yugamo smoke up once during this game. So the risk exists that this is a torpedo reload Fletcher, so I'm going full reverse. I can't afford to push because the NC is spotted on the minimap on my left. Pushing would put me into his broadside. And of course I can't sit still because the Yugamo, as we now found out, was in fact running torpedo reload. But I took this into account, this possibility, so I'm already reversing. I will probably eat, I doubt I'll be able to dodge them all. I will eat a couple of torps here, but that's okay since we've been unable to really tank damage so far, so we have a lot of health to spare, and eating a few torps isn't exactly the end of the world. I end up eating 2 torps, but in return I kill the Kurfürst. I'm showing a lot of broadside, but I figured that's okay because I'm getting behind the island, and surprisingly the Yamato is shooting HE. Now this is something I call the Royal Navy syndrome. The Royal Navy is very good with HE, so all these other people from all these other nationalities think that they should also be shooting HE in their battleships. And that's why a lot of them, you see a lot of these ships that should never touch HE, which are using it now, like German battleships that have exceptionally weak HE, or in this case a Yamato that has amazing AP, but this guy is shooting HE. You see it a lot these days, and that's honestly just the Royal Navy syndrome. And as long as it's my enemies doing it, I'm pretty okay with it, because, well, it doesn't really do much to me. Especially if I'm playing a battleship, I can deal with it quite easily. Shots out on the Lion, deal no damage. I still don't really know where the NC is, but I need to get out of this position. I've been locked into this position for so very long that I just want to get out of it. I need to get into the combat itself, and the only way for me to really do that is to kind of angle away from the NC and just go wide. I have no other options here. If I try to push straight, well, I'll just put my broadside right in front of the NC, and the NC, even though it's a tier 8, I've talked about the amazing accuracy on that ship and the great penetration. He will have no issues citadeling me. And we do see him spotted on our left, pushing up would have in effect put our broadside right in front of him. So this is one of those cases where I really want to tank, but once again, it's really hard for me to find an option, a possibility to do it. Now the Kurfürst on my team decided for some reason he really needed to push up, which I don't understand. And if you have a cap advantage, if you have 2 caps, the enemy has 1, why push? Especially in 4 versus 4. There is nothing to be gained unless the enemy is caught in an extremely vulnerable, or some individual player is caught in a vulnerable position that you can exploit, then maybe. But this guy, he was being shot at by all 4 of them. There was nothing to be gained from pushing in besides dying faster. And he says, Torps fire DDs, and I tell him to reverse, and then he says, I was dead. Well, it doesn't matter if you were dead. I mean, if you are going to die anyway, try to extend your life as long as possible. Reverse, survive. Yes, you will probably still die, but those seconds, that time you buy for your team can be extremely valuable, especially as long as we hold a cap advantage. Every second you buy for your team, when you have a cap advantage, is points for the team. And that's something people don't often understand. I'm giving a lot of broadside here, but that's because I really want to try to defend B. We need to hold B. The problem is though, our gearing is so very low, and once again I have a Yamato and an NC on my left. So if I try to turn in, which I really want to do at this point, I would love to turn in and push the cap and like try to defend it. But you see there's already AP running in from the left. We got the Yamato and we got an NC. And these are one of those cases where, once again, The other battleships could probably quite easily make this risky turn. But if I try it in a Yamato, I will probably get punished very hard. So I need to wait for an opportune moment to be able to turn hard left before I dare to do it. Because if I do it while they're waiting with their guns, I will get punished. Luckily though, the Lion is pointing full nose at me, and of course the Yamato's unique characteristics is that you can overmatch the nose and you can punish this kind of angle. A big volley just came in from the left, and there's the follow-up shells. That's my mark. They just shot. That's exactly what I was waiting for. Someone to shoot at me while I was angled, and now that he has shot, this is my time to go for this turn. Oh, and Yamato is extremely low. It was the Yamato that shot. I'm still gonna remain angled because the NC just shot. I'm kind of baiting this Lion to shoot me as well, because the Lion is very low HP, and if I could kill the Lion, that would be fantastic. I'm kind of giving a lot of broadside to the Lion, kind of daring him to shoot me, just so I can return fire and kill him. But the Lion is smartly holding his fire. I assume he's going to be repairing, and that's why he's refusing to fire. I pop my spotter plane to make sure I get vision and be able to shoot the Yamato, since we need to secure that kill, especially since the Yugumo just torped the gearing. So we just lost a very important player. That was our last DD. And now we were 2 versus 4, but I killed one of them, so we are 2 versus 3. With the Yamato dead and only the NC alive, it's time to take some risks. I start turning in as he shoots. I turn sharply enough that I should be able to dodge most of the volley. It's still a risky turn, and I could have gotten Citadel there, but ultimately I had the health to spare, and I was willing to make that trade to make sure that we secured the kill and didn't let him flee. Now though, we know the Yugumo was last seen at A. We know the Lion was last seen fleeing, so the Henry should be able to push the cap and secure it. The problem is though, I need to make sure nothing can kill him, and that includes the battleship, who is been healing up with that amazing Royal Navy heal, and of course there's a DD on my left. There's still that Yugumo on my left, and he might be torping me at any point right now. So I'm sailing straight for a while, but very soon I'm kind of waiting until the very last moment because I need him to use his torpedoes. And now I start turning. Hard left turn. This is where my instincts start kicking in. It's time to start turning, and my spotter plane notices him, and my spotter plane actually sees his torps as well. But I was already turning because this is something I was expecting. I knew this guy would be torping me again, so I'm able to dodge all the torps in time. If I hadn't been turning in time, I would be eating significantly more. Note that I cancel my turn because I know the Lion cannot resist shooting a pretty much full broadside with my guns pointed the wrong way. I have to make sure though that his shells are HE, and it turns out they are, but note that if that had been AP, stopping my turn the way I did was very important because I didn't give him the flat perfect broadside that he could Citadel me. Once he's shot, I continue my turn, because once again, remember, this is a torpedo reload Yugumo, so we knew there was a second volley of torps coming our way, so that's why we have to continue this turn to be able to dodge all the torpedoes. But it was very important to note there that when I started my turn, I aborted it intentionally halfway through while remaining angled, because I knew the Lion would fire at me, and well, it was HE, so the angling didn't matter, but if it had been AP, that could have been the difference between being killed by citadels or surviving. Because as I mentioned earlier in this commentary, the Yamato is extremely vulnerable to broadsides, especially at fairly short distances. Now though, all what that I've been doing has been distracting both of them. They've been focusing on me. In the meanwhile, the Henry, intelligently enough, went in and capped B just like I hoped. Now we have the cap advantage, we have point advantage, and there's no reason for me to do any sort of pushing. It's time to start kiting away. I never wanted to hunt the Yugumo, I just wanted to turn into his torps. And now I'm kiting away from the Yugumo, and I'm turning my guns on the Lion to make sure he can't just push in and bully my Henry 4. I can easily pen him through the nose, and I kite away from the Yugumo while trying to turn my guns for the Lion. The torps are coming my way, but it's too late, the game is already ending. If the game lasted a bit longer, I'd be able to kill the Lion, which would end it. Although if there was more points available, I would probably eat some torps, but that was never really a risk because of the way the time was ticking down. And finally, of course, we get to the score screen. Battle time expired, and we would have won on points, 1,000 points very soon anyway. 288,000 damage, which is of course quite good. 7 citadels, 6 kills. This was my daily win for the Yamato, so of course always a nice daily win to get. And looking at team score 3.2k base XP. The follow-up has 1.7, which was the Henry who made the intelligent choice of actually pushing that cap, surviving as long as he did and pushing the cap, so I guess props to him for actually playing the end game quite intelligently. Overall though, this does kind of show the sheer firepower of the Yamato, and why even with these weaknesses, like the raised citadel and such, the power of the AP cannot be denied. I mean, if we look at the detailed report, you see that I only landed 83 shells. I mean, I did shoot 288, but 83 shells and still 287k damage. So the average damage per shell is very, very high on this ship. And even though I had such issues getting into the battle, such issues getting into a position where I could efficiently bring my armor and health to bear to help my team, I still racked up 2.5 million potential damage. And that was mostly just, probably a lot of it is dodging the torps, but of course all the incoming fire that I kind of bounced as well. And I thought that this was a pretty important game in that sense that it's not always easy to find an opportunity to tank damage, because you can tank damage just by charging in. Anyone can tank damage just by charging in, but the thing is, you have to make sure that the damage you're tanking is actually helping your team. If you're just making yourself an easy target for no other reason than to make yourself an easy target, then that's not really intelligent positioning at all. And that was kind of my goal with this commentary, to show that it's okay sometimes to not put yourself into like unnecessary harm's way if there's really nothing to be gained here. And this was one of those games. Detailed report, I did make a nice 37k. Also, credits and XP, that is, I did make a nice 37k. Captain XP, which is of course nice. I can show you guys my recommended build. It hasn't changed, but it's been a couple of months since I last featured the Yamato again, and people always tend to ask me if I don't show it at the end. Right, starting off, we have the modules. Consumable wise, you should be running premium damage control, because the default damage control is 2 minutes of cooldown, which is far too long to deal with. And if you can afford it, run premium repair party as well. Spotter plane is not nearly as important, and only if you have money to splurge, go for the premium option. Upgrade wise, I go for turret survival, which is of questionable value. You could run the auxiliary armaments mod as well for better AA and secondary survival. Mostly this, I only run this, I find this most valuable when I'm nose to nose with other Yamatos, because that's really the only shells that tend to have a big impact on knocking out your turrets. So you could run auxiliary just as well. Both options are pretty fine in this case. Auxiliary will not save your AA or secondaries if in case you face Royal Navy battleships, because the HE will shatter everything regardless, but I mean it will mitigate it a bit, which is of course quite nice. Better dispersion, absolutely. Your guns are your bread and butter, that's the big thing about this ship. Faster reload, you have more than enough range. Once again, we want more firepower. Tankiness, and even more tankiness. Damage control 1 and 2. The rudder shift can be okay, but ultimately you are spotted so much all the time because your concealment simply isn't good enough like some of your competition. So and you often have to reverse, sitting nose in and so forth. So just go for the sheer tankiness. And finally, concealment expert, because, well, being able to disengage eventually is better than never being able to disengage, especially since you are such a juicy target to all sorts of HE spammers. Captain perks wise, I love priority target. Even in the commentary you noticed it saved me once against the Yugoma by priority target. The number in priority target disappeared, and that's very important. Note that it says will show the number of opponents that are currently aiming at your ships with main battery guns. This of course means that if a DD switches from main battery guns to torpedoes, the number in the brackets goes down by 1, because he's no longer aiming his main battery guns at you. So that was what tipped me off that the Yugama was torping me, and that was why I instantly slowed down and managed to dodge the torps. So this perk is exceptionally valuable in late game situations against DDs if they don't understand to constantly have their torpedoes selected, which is of course what I recommend for DD players. Follow it up with expert marksman. You have to have this on the Yamato, the turret traverse is so terrible. Superintendent, you need that additional heal. And I would say concealment expert probably first. Once you have this basic build, spec into adrenaline rush. follow it up with fire prevention, and the last 3 points into vigilance. You might note that almost all these perks are about survival, and that's the way it should be. You want to be able to survive. You want to be able to survive torps with vigilance, you want additional heal, you want additional concealment, and you want additional fire prevention. And this ultimate build though makes you a very tanky and very nasty ship to deal with. As long as you don't give the enemy free citadels, it's going to take them a long time to kill you, which is of course the whole point of playing a tier 10 battleship. Signals wise, priority 1 is heal, followed by fire reduction, followed I would say by shorter reload time on consumables, and then you can add AA and secondaries. Not that important really on the Yamato. There are other ships who benefit more, but I mean, if you have a lot of them like I do, you might as well run them here. The rest can be XP, whatever. You can run speed, you can run ramming flag, whatever, but honestly they're not that important because you really won't be using either of those too much. If someone gets close enough for you to be able to ram, you're probably gonna blap them with your main guns, but I mean, there might be a situation where it's useful, so I mean, why not? Actually, considering I want money on this account, I'm gonna use this one instead. And other than that though, I don't think there's too much to talk about regarding the build on this ship. The camo I'm running here is, I think I'm running my Hunter camos, or yeah, this is Hunter camos. This give me Commander XP and credits, that's why I like them. Plus they look really amazing on the Yamato as well. Anyway, that was my Yamato commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.